Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is episode 10 in James' interview series. I have today my great guest, Michael Lofton, the distinguished distinction maker and the nuance maker. Michael, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, James?
I'm doing really good. And Michael, I promised a friend of mine I would say this to you when we had our interview, and it is this. It's the most important question. So, of all of your skits, my favorite skit, and for everyone out there listening, go check out Michael's short theology comedy skits. They're amazing. The one you had on the tragedy of Bob the Nuanced. So today, from a level 1 to 10, how much of a nuanced Bob the Nuance are you?
Oh boy, maybe an 8. I don't go as far as Bob the Nuance, right? Because he got so nuanced that he actually left Catholicism. So I'm not going to be a 10. But I mean, as the saying goes, I think it was R.C. Sproul who said, well, the saying is that it's the woman's prerogative to say no, or to change her mind, I should say. It's a woman's prerogative to change her mind, and it is the theologian's prerogative to make distinctions. And I live by that. I live by that because I honestly think that a great deal of the discussions that we have when it comes to theology revolve around distinctions and nuance. That's not to say that there are no things. Here I am being nuanced. That's
Right.
not to say that there are no things that are black and white. There are.
Right.
There are. Is Jesus consubstantial with the Father? Yes or no? Yes, he is.
Right, exactly.
So there are some things that are black and white, but then, but is he only God? Well, he's fully God, but he's also fully man. Here we go, adding some more distinctions, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
I think that the nuance and their distinctions are really important because they surround a lot of the discussions that we have, and I think a lot of people fail to make them, and that's why they end up in errant theology.
Yeah, definitely. And just for everyone out there, Michael Lofton is the host of Reason and Theology, and I have been following you, Michael, since 2019. Actually, when you started, yeah, because
that's when we started.
Yeah, because I was Facebook friends with Eric Yavara back in, I want to say maybe January or February of 2018 is when I first heard of him, and then added him on Facebook, and then I just asked him a whole bunch of questions on the papacy, and he sent me lists of books. And then so me and him were having like several hour-long conversations over the phone about stuff. And I would just be like, hey, what do you think about what Sachensky says here and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, and then when you guys did a podcast together, I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. So then I started following it, and the rest is history.
You've been there from the start. That's awesome.
I was about to say, I was there before the dark times, before the empire.
Right.
But
yeah, because I've seen your name come up for a long time. So yeah, you have been there from the start.
Yeah, it's funny because back in the day, I have this, really bad addictive problem to just binge watching a lot of stuff on theology and philosophy. And my original goal was to watch everything you produced. But this year, I don't know what it is. You became like a machine gun M19 belt on an M60, and I was just like, "Wait, stop!"
In less than we're still less than 3 years, 800 videos. So if you're gonna watch every one of them, good luck.
So now I'm just selective. I'm like, okay, is he criticizing rad trads? Is he talking about the papacy, the magisterium? And is it a funny thing like Bob the Nuanced?
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I'll provide links in the description for your YouTube channel and your website, Reason and Theology.
Yeah.
And just one last comedic thing I'll say before we go on is I really like the elegant cardboard books you have.
I know, I'm telling you, I spent a lot of time, because if you go through each one of the cardboard books, the text of each book is actually in there, and it's the real text of the real book. That, I mean, takes a long time to do that, right?
Because Michael, we all know if you disagree with someone, you just automatically assume that they haven't read all the books they have in their background. That's just
It's got to be the case, and all the writing that is in them too is also just cardboard. All the notes.
Oh yeah, man. Alrighty.
That's how you know you follow R&T, when you know all the inside jokes.
And also, sadly, I will forgive you tonight, Matt. I almost called you Matthew. I don't know why. Michael.
Believe it or not, there was somebody at my job who called me Matthew, and I didn't have the heart to correct him, so I just let it go. And he continued to call me Matthew, and it went on for years. So for years, he would call me Matthew, and I would just go with it.
That's funny. So it's just like I'm now Matt. That's it.
Yeah. I am. he once came to my desk too, and it saw that it said Michael Lofton on there, and I'm sure that confused him, but he still continued to call me Matthew. So okay.
Yeah, and but what I was gonna say is, like, I'll forgive you tonight, but I don't see the globe and the ladder. But
the ladder, you can't see it. It's right outside of the screen, and the globe is, where is the globe? I don't even know. It's somewhere around here. Oh, it's on top of there, right above the ladder. There it is. But you can't see it. I'd have to move the camera. So.
Yeah, that's because the globe has primacy over the ladder. So
that's what it is. But I mean, since it's not in the video, this is not a canonical appearance of RT. So that's what it is.
Oh gosh. Alrighty, everyone. Well, our subject today is on papal authority in relation to the liturgy in specific. And Michael, back in, I want to say, August 17th, I have it pulled up here. Mm-hmm. You wrote an article called Traditionis Custodes, an abuse of papal authority. And just real quickly, for introduction purposes and background, why did you write that article?
It was in response to an article that Peter Kwasniewski wrote. In fact, it wasn't an article. It was put into an article. It was actually a lecture of his that he delivered. It was then put into an article and posted on Rorati Celli. And I was very concerned about his misuse of certain sources and also his lack of engagement with the sources that I had presented, although he was specifically talking about me and probably Timothy Gordon when he was offering this lecture as far as response. So I just did not find it to be really that he really engaged the content, and I wanted to bring that out. So I wrote the article in response, which he didn't bother to read.
Oh, interesting.
And he said that he wasn't going to read it. And also that he's not willing to even come on and discuss it. So there you go.
That's unfortunate. Was it a misinterpretation?
That's been the case really with Kwasniewski for several years. Since the beginning of the show, we've invited him to come on for many times, and he has always declined, and he's never given me a legitimate, in my opinion, reason. Now, nobody is required to come on. I'm not saying that he has to give me I'm not saying that he has to really give me a legitimate reason to explain himself. But what I'm saying is, since he wants to try to at least engage some of my content, then it would make sense for him to explain why won't he come on the show and discuss these things in person, at least virtually. You know what I mean? Not actually in person, since I'm not going to fly him out or anything. But I think that would be more beneficial than just going back and forth on Twitter. That was kind of my point, and he doesn't want to do that. And I have not seen anything reasonable from him as far as why he doesn't want to do that. And my thing is, well, if you have the truth, you have nothing to lose.
Yeah,
there should be nothing to be afraid of if you're on the side of truth. And if you're also on the side of wanting to know the truth, right? Because maybe I'm wrong, and I'm willing to accept that. It's not the first time that I've been wrong and have admitted that I'm wrong. I'm willing to accept that maybe I'm wrong, but I would like for somebody to be able to show that to me, and I don't think he's done that.
Yeah, that's a good principle too, because like that's something, without getting too specific, where in the past I've been like, I'm definitely willing to admit that I'm wrong on certain things, but I really need a hefty substantive type of persuasion.
I'd rather maintain his position. I'd rather maintain it just because it would be easier. It's less work for me. But at the end of the day, truth isn't based on what is easier, right? And
Mm.
I'm not going to go with simply what is easier to defend. That's not me. So I mean, there's actually a sense in which I would like for him to be true, but I just don't see
Mm.
him engaging the evidence enough to demonstrate that that's the case.
Yeah, I appreciate that honesty, and that's something I've always, just in watching you over the last 3 years now, I've noticed about you and found, admirable that you're willing to go with things even if you don't necessarily like them. So
I mean, look, I'm as you probably already know, I'm more Byzantine than I am Latin Rite at this point. In
mhm.
fact, I'm in the process of changing my rite from Latin to Eastern Catholic to the Byzantine rite. So that the position that there are limits to the papacy is much more in agreement with the more Eastern Catholic approach. So
Yeah, right.
again, I'm much more disposed to his view than he realizes. But again, I have to deal with the evidence.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, Michael. And let me just go ahead real briefly here, and I just want to share my screen with everyone. Let me see here. Do. Yeah, so this is the article for everyone. Just to check it out there, give
Mhm.
you a visual. Beautiful liturgy, by the way.
Mm.
Picture.
And I'm sure that throws them off that I actually appreciate the Tridentine Mass and have a picture of it there.
Yeah.
because people who are in his circle think that I just absolutely hate the traditional Latin Mass. I think it's a misnomer, but I'll use that term. Yeah, they portray me as somebody who just absolutely hates tradition and hates the quote unquote traditional Roman rite, and that's simply not the case.
Yeah,
If
definitely.
you were to just give me your average Novus Ordo and your average traditional Latin Mass and ask which would I prefer to go to, if I were forced to choose, I would clearly say the traditional Latin Mass
Mhm.
compared to your average Novus Ordo. Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Just like, I live here in Steubenville, and St. Peter's here celebrates both forms of the Roman Rite. And it is done reverently and beautifully. The ordinary form is done ad orientem. I was just there for Mass, oh yeah, yesterday because of the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And, it's for me, I'm just like, if I can get the ordinary form and its beauty and reverence, that's my preference, because I like saying
Yeah.
the creed. I like saying the creed in English and saying the liturgy in mostly vernacular. With, of course, we have the Sanctus and the Kyrie eleison and all these other things, and other Latin chants and stuff. I
Mhm.
mean, it's not just like, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's my main thing. And I even told my confessor this the other day. I was just like, why can't we just do Vatican II right? That's all I want. It's all I
Yeah.
want.
Well, look, if we have an ideal Novus Ordo, I'd actually prefer that over the traditional Latin Mass, but
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to find, and that's
it
part
is.
of the problem. And I'm willing
Yeah.
to concede that that is a problem. But also, I put my money where my mouth is. I'm the same guy who had to drive an hour and a half every single Saturday to go to a low mass because I prefer that over the average Novus Ordo that I had available to me, and I did that for quite a long time. And so it's ironic that guys like Kwasniewski will say that, well, these guys are talking about the traditional Latin Mass, referring to me specifically, but I've really never spent some time in it, even though I actually spent a lot of time in it and
Mhm.
drove and again spent a lot of time driving to it. So I'm familiar with it. I'm very familiar with how the traditional Latin Mass is. I'm also very familiar with the Novus Ordo and the average scene there as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, just before we begin with some more magisterial theology stuff, I just wanted to ask you, do you mind just giving a brief definition for those that are not familiar with Catholic terminology? Because I have some non-Catholics that subscribe to my channel. What is the Roman Rite?
Well, I mean, a rite, simply put, is a way of living the Christian life, and that's not just my definition, although you can find it multiple places. I'll give you straight from TAF. I pulled it out just specifically for this, because of course that's going to come up in this discussion. He says a rite is simply Catholicism as it has developed according to the culture and spirit of a particular people. The word rite, bearing as it does the connotation of ritual and ceremony, is perhaps a poor choice to denote the extremely complex and rich reality. For rite is not just liturgy, but rather a complete Catholic tradition, the unique way that a particular community of the faithful perceives, expresses, and lives its Catholic life. It is a way of life. Now, obviously, there are different ways of life among Catholics, and so there's going to be different rites. We mentioned earlier the Byzantine rite. It's a way of living the Christian life that includes the liturgy, but is not just limited to the liturgy. Same thing for the Roman rite. It is the way in which especially the Christians in Rome lived the Christian life. Now that liturgy and that way of life was then disseminated to other places, England and all over the world, especially in Europe. It was disseminated through a long process, kind of replacing their traditions and rites, rightly or wrongly, but that's the case. And so a lot of people ended up going with the Roman way of living, but that's effectively what a rite is.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that definition, Michael. And so let us get into it, as it were. So, Michael, simply put, does the Pope have authority to alter or abolish or institute new rites?
Alter, abolish, and institute new rites. According to the magisterium, he does. Whether we like that or not, that is what the magisterium teaches. So if we believe the magisterium has authority and we owe to its teachings, if it's non-definitive, religious submission of intellect and will, and if it's definitive, either the assent of faith or something that is to be held definitively. If the magisterium means anything to us, we can't just flippantly ignore it. We have to give the appropriate level of assent, one of those three that I just mentioned, depending on what level of authority the proposition is taught, right? Now, I have it pulled up here. I want to pull up something from the Council of Trent, if you don't mind me giving you some sources.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
This is what the Council of Trent says, section 21, chapter 2. And right after this, later on, there is also a corresponding anathema. So I would actually say, even though parts of Trent, when it comes to the chapters, and notice I'm saying the chapters.
Right, yeah.
When it comes to the chapters, there are some teachings in it that are non-definitive. That is true, and that's something that most theologians would agree with. Unless what is in the chapter corresponds to something that is later on in the anathema, in the canon and anathema. So in that case, what is expressed in the chapter is actually definitive because it's then definitively confirmed in the canon.
Gotcha.
Since there's a corresponding canon to these propositions, I would argue this is definitive. So there would be an irrevocable assent that would need to be given here. So the Council of Trent says this: it furthermore declares that this power has ever been in the church, that in the dispensation of the sacraments, their substance being untouched, it may ordain or change what things soever it may judge most expedient for the profit of those who receive, or for the veneration of the said sacraments, according to the differences of circumstances, times, and places. Notice this. And by the way, the understanding of an interpretation that I'm about to give to you is also what is confirmed by the manualists, as I've had individuals on the show who have gone through the history of the manualists as they interpreted Trent on this. This is how the manualists understood it. So I'm definitely in good company when it comes to my interpretation here. So notice that it's saying, when it comes to the dispensation of the sacraments, as long as we maintain their substance, which I would argue that has been preserved in the Roman Rite, the church can change whatever things it may judge most expedient. And notice it's the church who judges what is most expedient, not me as an individual. That's the key. It's the church who determines that. because somebody might retort and say, yeah, that all that's true, but it has to be in accord with what is good and what is just. Okay, but it's not you as an individual who gets to determine that. It's the
Right.
church
Yes.
itself, whatever the church thinks is most expedient. Now, the only other response would be to say, well, the substance has been changed. If we're going to say in the substance of the sacrament in the Novus Ordo has somehow been changed. If somebody were going to argue that, I would just simply say, well, you just gave up the indefectibility of the church, because if you look at the
Right. Yeah.
manualists, you look at the manualists and manualist tradition, that's one of the things that will always be preserved, and that's one of the indicators that the church has defected, is that it no longer preserves the substance of the sacraments. So clearly we can't argue that with the Roman Rite. Now, I recognize the substance of the sacrament is not identified with the substance of the rite. I get that. But that's the thing. If the substance is preserved, what things soever, that would then include rites. It may change those, as long as it judges it expedient. Now, that's what it can do. Potency. That's what it's able to do. Should it do? Should it change? Again, we can debate that. I think ultimately it's the church who determines whether or not it should or shouldn't, according to this here. But yeah, I think we can have a respectful discussion in dialogue with the magisterium, asking, should this have been changed?
Right. Yeah.
We can have that conversation. And I'm not arguing that every change that has been made to the Roman Rite was for the better in the post-conciliar era. I'm not arguing that. I'm just simply arguing, can it? So that would then mean it is able to discontinue certain aspects of a rite or a rite altogether. And it's not just this that confirms that. There are other texts from the magisterium that explicitly say that it's able to do that with the rite, which we can take a look at right now if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And by the way, before we dive into that one particular, since it's coming up just in the order on my screen, let me go over this one as well. The First Vatican Council, here's what it states in Pastor Eternus, chapter 3, section 1. It says, wherefore we teach and declare by divine ordinance. By the way, notice that we teach and declare. That sounds kind of definitive. When you find that in an ecumenical council, that's definitely can be argued to be an indicator of the employment of infallibility. The Roman Church possesses a preeminence of ordinary power over every other church, and that this jurisdictional power of the Roman pontiff is both episcopal and immediate, both clergy and faithful, of whatever right and dignity. So it's not just talking about the Roman Rite, we're talking about all rights here. Both singly and collectively are bound to submit to this power by the duty of hierarchical subordination and true obedience. And this not only in matters concerning faith and morals, it's not just faith and morals that this falls within, but also in those things which regard discipline and government of the church throughout the world. Now, obviously, the liturgy falls under that. Now, of course, somebody's going to retort and just say, but the liturgy is not strictly discipline. Yeah, I know. It's part faith, morals, and discipline. But guess what? This canon just included faith, morals, and discipline and government. So even though the liturgy is not strictly that, it is what this not what this canon, but what this chapter here in Vatican I is saying is that all of it is within the scope of the church's authority. Clearly, the liturgy falls within that scope, as long as the substance is preserved, as the previous council said. As long as the substance is preserved, the Pope has no authority to change the substance, and the Pope has no authority to change. So, for example, he has no authority to change the substance of the sacrament of the Eucharist. He just simply can't do that. He can't just say, we're now going to use Coca-Cola and chips. I think when you start messing with things like that, you've actually touched on the substance as well, not just the accidents, but also the substance, because it's no longer bread and wine, the substance of bread and wine. It's now the substance of Coke and chips. So there's that we should also consider. There's some more here. And by the way, again, there is a corresponding anathema attached to those who would deny what we just read from Vatican I. Here's also what Mediator Dei says from Pius XII, paragraph 58. Now, I don't think that what we find here, as compared to the other teachings that we saw, I don't think this is necessarily definitive. In and of itself, right? I don't think Mediator Dei that Pius XII is exercising his infallible authority whenever he says this. So that would be, at least in the document itself, it would be a non-definitive teaching. Now, you might argue that, but what he's expressing in a non-definitive fashion is already definitive by the ordinary and universal. You might be able to argue that. That's fine. But I do just want to make a distinction between what we saw with Trent and Vatican I, where you do have a definitive context, I would argue, versus here that I would argue is non-definitive. So here I would say the level of assent is a little lower, but it's still required nonetheless. I'm not able to dissent from this.
Right.
See, that's the thing. Just because it's not definitive doesn't mean I can just automatically dissent. There are extremely rare cases where we can withhold religious submission of intellect and will to a teaching that's non-definitive. Extremely rare. And the boxes that Donum Veritatis has given us have not been checked in most cases. So assent needs to be given. Here's what it says. It follows from this that the sovereign pontiff alone enjoys the right to recognize and establish any practice touching the worship of God. And here's to answer your question that you asked me, to introduce and approve new rites, and also to modify those he judges require modification. Now, you also asked me, could he abolish? He doesn't explicitly say abolish. He does say modify, but he doesn't say abolish explicitly. But I think, look, if you have the ability to introduce and approve, and I would also argue that historically one might be able to argue that there has been some discontinuing of entire rites by Rome. I would say that within the concept here of modify also includes discontinuing the rite altogether. So he can introduce, approve, modify rites. Now, notice also that it's those he judges to require modification.
Yeah, that's very,
because everybody's going to say, but yeah, all that's true. Kwasniewski is going to try to retort, as he tries to do in that article, and says, yeah, all that's true, but it has to be within the scope of what's just. And again, the liturgy is not divorced from faith and morals. He can't change faith and morals, can he? Well, notice here what it's saying. It's he who gets to judge what requires modification, not Kwasniewski and not me. And not you. No private individual gets to determine that. It's what he judges. And the church, it's not just the Pope, it's also, although it's speaking here about the Pope, as we've seen in the previous statements, it's the church as well. The church here being the magisterium, not being individual private laymen. Now, you might be able to argue, okay, but it also refers to the entire people of God. I don't think contextually that's what Trent and Vatican I are referring to when it speaks about the church, especially Trent. I think it's talking about the teaching authority and the one that governs and rules. It has that authority. So those are just a few texts that I would say we should consider. I don't know if you want to ask any questions.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that, Michael. One of the things that came to my mind was this, that I understand and agree that it's not that Mediator Dei number 58, I mean the whole thing too, but it's not ex cathedra, it's not extraordinary. And you alluded to this too, but couldn't one basically interpret this as infallible in the ordinary sense of the Pope's majesty?
Yes, and you could also say that it's expressing what we had already read from Vatican I and also Trent. It's just simply re-expressing that. That could be argued. I just want to note that the proposition itself alone considered in this document is not delivered in a definitive fashion, but the proposition considered historically and in the context of other statements could be a definitive proposition expressed in a non-definitive fashion, because that's possible. A pope could, in a non-definitive way, um, confirm a dogma. I mean, he could do that.
Right, yeah,
Right.
yeah, because it's
If he mentions the dogmatic teaching in an encyclical, is that somehow ex cathedra? No, of course not. That's a non-definitive confirmation of something that's already definitively taught, that may have previously been taught ex cathedra, but it's not a new ex cathedra confirmation unless he reconfirms it ex cathedra.
yeah. Or I mean, here's an example. Or in many papal encyclicals, let's just say for the sake of argument, the case study of the 20th century and the 21st century. So from what Pius X to Saint Pius X to Pope Francis, a lot of them mention the Trinity. Well, that was defined at Nicaea in 325, right? So that wasn't ex cathedra in in a Vatican I sense. It was done by a early ecumenical council in the 4th century. So I see what you're saying there. That makes a lot of sense. And I still need to do for my own research and study. I've been following you a lot on this, and I've watched a few of your episodes with Dr. John Joy. And I need to read Kloiken and Joy and others on this, but because my own understanding or leaning in understanding magisterial theology, I should say, is I tend to take a lot of things, like I just said or asked about, infallible in the ordinary sense, because sometimes it makes me kind of wish, I mean, the church is wiser than I am, but sometimes I kind of wish we had a different word other than infallibility to kind of express. I mean, that's why I do like ordinary.
I use definitive. I use the term definitive. Yeah, because definitive more refers to the teaching. Infallibility refers to the organ that teaches. I don't like the term infallible a whole lot, though. I like definitive. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like quick clarification too, because can also be said too of non-definitive that it is still propositionally, as stated or put forward, still reliable and true as far as it goes.
It's authoritative, it's authentic, right? Is it reliable as true? If it's non-definitive, then it's possible it could later on be reversed. How likely is it going to be reversed? I'd challenge anybody to give me an example of one clear-cut reversal in the entire history of the magisterium. That's what I'm writing my doctoral dissertation on, so I'd love to see it. There are some alleged cases, of course, but I'd like to see a clear-cut case. I haven't seen that yet, but I'm still open to, in theory, that could happen, since by definition, a non-definitive teaching is just that. It's non-definitive, so therefore it could be reversed. So when you say it's reliable, it's true, there is a very slight chance that it might not be true. How likely is that? I don't think it's likely at all. Now, I think a better way of phrasing it would be the way some of the theologians from the 1900s and earlier phrased it, and that is it safe, right? Because something could actually not be true, but still be safe.
Yeah.
I would say that I would argue in favor that there is a safety to the non-definitive authoritative teachings of the church. That doesn't mean that none of them could be reversed. Doesn't mean that there couldn't be an error in it. But if there is an error, it's not going to be one that is harmful to your soul, that if you followed the magisterium, you would go to hell.
Right. Yeah. And I bring that up because like the language of reversibility is important, because at least in my thinking on this subject, it's reversibility speaks to its amendability in the future, such as with, motu proprios, and so on and so forth. It's not the final words. They could be redacted, rescinded, canceled out, etc. But at the same time, I guess what I'm kind of concerned of is that it's not like the Pope, because I've heard certain radical traditionalists say, or at least the logical conclusion would sort of insinuate that the Pope could essentially be, on this point, with it being reversible, means that the Pope could essentially err, but like
I don't think that this proposition could be reversed, because I think the proposition is not limited to Mediator Day 58 alone. If all we had was Mediator Day 58, you could say possibly it could be reversed, but tentatively you still need to give assent to it, which these guys don't do.
right, yeah, and this is
which,
yeah.
by the way, is objectively considered that is a grave sin to not give assent to a non-definitive teaching, unless you've checked all the boxes of Donum Veritatis, which I don't think they have. But it's not Mediator Day alone, right? It's Mediator Day after we've already had Vatican I and Trent, from what we just saw,
yeah,
among others.
Yeah.
So considered in that context, I don't think this could be reversed.
Definitely. Yeah. And more specifically, I definitely agree. And of course, there's the cynical part of me that's like, who cares what ratrats say, to the extent that it affects other people. That's why I care. So, and that's why I think you care too, and are talking about it on your channel a lot too. And so, yeah, I appreciate that, Michael. So the next question I have for you is this. So many object, and you've alluded to this already, but I want to kind of go into this more. Many object, and by many, I really, from what I've seen online in your discussions, and then also on the Facebooks, as they say, the many traditionalists, radical traditionalists, ratrads, whatever, and everyone in between, that object that the Pope does not have this authority to do what you've just read for us. Additionally, that, as you said, he doesn't have this authority, or that he shouldn't. It seems to me, and I could be wrong, but I typically don't see citations from them from magisterial texts. I see important works cited. I see works like Gamber, Benedict XVI, or then Cardinal Ratzinger, some of his works
who's not in on their side, by the way, who's not on their side. Summorum Pontificum is not on their side.
Dropping bombs.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say dropping based bombs.
Yeah.
But I was about to say, someone make like a meme or whatever, like kind of like in The Lion King, like with Mufasa and Scar.
Right.
Like Michael just being Scar, being like, Benedict is not on your side.
He's not. I haven't seen anything that's in favor of them, because everything that I've heard them, especially Kwasniewski, but others like Timothy Flanders, that they've used from Benedict is entirely compatible with my theology and what he has also said in Summorum Pontificum. And Summorum Pontificum explicitly rejects their view. So that's my thing. If I can read Ratzinger in a way that's consistent with everything he says in Summorum Pontificum, and it's consistent with my theology, you're not really giving me anything that refutes my theology. You're just misreading those things and thinking that it refutes my theology when it does. And it's kind of like whenever a Protestant quotes the Bible to you and says, see, that means, well, I mean, Paul rebuked Peter, so therefore the Pope can't be infallible, as if that's really engaging the Catholic. But that's not engaging the Catholic position. That doesn't touch me. Well, the stuff that they offer from Ratzinger, which you can see Kwasniewski in that article that we were referencing, doesn't touch my position. Everything that Ratzinger says, I confirm. How is that? In the same way that, well, Paul rebuking Peter and everything else that the New Testament says, I can affirm and still maintain papal infallibility. How is that? Well, because Scripture doesn't contradict it. It's simply the Protestant misreading Scripture. Same thing. Kwasniewski et al. Will quote Ratzinger against Ratzinger, but it doesn't really touch on my interpretation. So I would say they're just misunderstanding him.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's, I've, and in terms of like because I want to be charitable, and of course, something you've said a lot on your show is that you don't judge motives, as no one really
Try
should.
not to. Yeah,
Yeah,
try not to.
yeah, because it's really, I mean, I
Unless it's manifestly clear what their intentions are, right? But
right,
it's
like
very hard to determine that.
right, like, and we won't get into this too much, but kind of like the last few episodes on Mike Winger have kind of
Yeah,
out there,
yeah,
but but
yeah,
um but yeah, definitely, because like I can't read minds and want to be fair, but
sure.
I've seen some people like Eric Sammons, he seems like a good guy. He's like, as a good person, I could like get a beer with him or something like that, but on theology I don't find him satisfying on different things, even though he strikes me as a man who's trying to do his best with different things, at least in living his faith. I don't think with at the same level of stuff with the magisterium and other things that you've dealt with, it's not sufficient. But so one thing that I want to mention too is, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you think I'm off here, I wonder if those that disagree with you, if they, I don't want to say if they actually believe mediator Dei. What I really want to say is, it seems like there's some very weak, simple affirmations of its magisterial authority, but so far I haven't really seen a counter interpretation of your hermeneutic that you've provided of Mediator Dei number 58. I've seen counter assertions.
Yeah.
I've seen that made, but in this passage that you've read, it doesn't seem like it's been substantially addressed. So do you think I'm
Yeah.
off here, or what do you think about
No, I agree with you. It doesn't overturn anything that I've said or anything that you can read from the text, for that matter, which is more important, right? Yeah, I think that's the case. Look, when it comes to someone like Salmons, when he and I had a discussion on Timothy Gordon's channel about Traditionis
Yeah, I
Custodes,
saw that.
I asked him some very basic fundamental questions
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the authority of the Pope. Does he have the authority, however, to do this? Well, I haven't really looked into it. Then you don't belong into this discussion. You don't belong in this discussion at all. Go. Why are you even here? You can only be in this discussion if you have actually studied it. And here's my thing. Okay, well, maybe you could come on and be in this discussion if you're reserved in your opinion, if you haven't studied it. But to make the assertions that he makes when he hasn't studied it, why are you here? You're in no position to make that determination. So that was my concern with Salmons. Why is he commenting on something he hasn't studied? If I haven't studied it, I would just say, look, I'm not really sure. Here's what I know based on what I know, but I'm going to be very guarded in my assertion. He was not guarded in his assertion. He was saying, this is wrong in Pope Francis. But wait, does he have, according to the magisterium, the authority? Well, I haven't really looked into this. Then why are you here? And why are you giving us your opinion as if it's fact?
Yeah,
That's my problem with guys like Salmons. They don't really engage the magisterium. And so my thing is, okay, if they're unsettled about this, unsure, that's fine. Hey, I'm unsettled about a lot of things, but you won't catch me making an opinion as if it is dogma and an assertion in the way that they do when I haven't actually studied the issue.
Yeah,
so that's my problem.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And it's, that's why I made that distinction of
Right.
between the person and his theology, because I didn't watch the full thing because frankly I'm over it, but I saw that he had Taylor Marshall on, and I'm like, that kind of sheds more light on that discussion, I think, in some like tertiarily so. But
well, I think his position is basically promoting the SSPX agenda. Whether he attends the SSPX or not, I don't know. But the very things that they're asserting is what he is promoting, along with 1 Peter 5 and along with Taylor Marshall. They're all in that same camp of promoting that ideology, even if they're not part of the SSPX. They may or may not be. I don't know. That's the problem, though. And I don't think that position adequately engages the magisterium, which is why I don't maintain that.
Yeah, agreed. And that's, it's I'll just say this and then go to the next question is,
Mm.
who you affiliate with or, try to
Mm-hmm.
network with or make alliances with, for lack of a better term, it says a lot. And so when he had that with that show with Taylor Marshall, I was kind of like, okay. And I knew that he had written stuff for 1 Peter 5 before. That wasn't news to me, but just because, and again, I've stopped watching Taylor Marshall since 2019, because just brief background. In 2019, late 2018, when everything with McCarrick broke, I binge watched stuff like Taylor Marshall and Timothy Gordon before they had their schism between each other. Binge watched them, read a crap ton of 1 Peter 5, watched a lot of Fatima Center stuff, watched a lot of Church Militant, and watched a lot of different traditionalists and hyper-traditionalist type of outlets. And I left the church. Like I didn't, in me, I was like, I've come back since, but like, to me, I didn't see how this was logically consistent to stay in Catholicism and believe many of these things. And I had reached out to people because, like, I was even considering sedevacantism at one point. I reached out to William Albrecht on Facebook about it because I saw that he had debated the Diamond Brothers. And to be clear, like, I wasn't like a Diamond's brother type of sedevacantist. It was more, right. It was more of a conceptual thing for me, because I was like, well, wait a second. I don't believe in some of these weird conspiracy theories that some of the sedevacantists believe in. But if there is this massive paradigm shift between the death of Pius XII and then St. John the 23rd, in terms of theology and the papacy, I don't see how I could say this is the same religion anymore. So in sort of that sense, I was like a conceptual sedevacantist. And it made me look at orthodoxy way more deeper as well. And I, just my own cards on the table too. I was very much anti-Pope Francis, but since then I've kind of become more of a, I wouldn't say full-blown where Peter is, but like I definitely like people like Mark Howsam, Mike Lewis, and Pedro Gabriel. I had Pedro Gabriel on my show. And so I think that the hermeneutic of continuity as a principle in all areas of theology with the post-conciliar and pre-conciliar church is very important. And we talked about in that show with Pedro, Familiaris Consortio and Amoris Laetitia. And so I know that was kind of a little bit of a rant, just wanted to give some context. And one thing I also wanted to point out to the viewers about what you've just read is, notice, everyone, that everything Michael read is pre-Vatican II. So that's important. Yeah.
I mean, because that's where we would have common ground, right? If I were to cite something post-Vatican II, they're going to say, "Oh, well, that's corrupted," Okay, so let's go to the pre-Vatican II sources. Same when it comes to Orthodox apologetics. I'm not going to post something after Florence or something, really even after 1054, although I don't think that's when the schism happened, but because they think that's when it happened, okay, fine, I'll give you stuff prior to 1054. Because it's kind of the common ground that we have.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good method. And so we'll camp out here for the remainder. You got to go at 7, is that right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Alrighty. So in the letter accompanying Traditionis Custodes, Pope Francis says this, citing Pope Benedict XVI. The missal promulgated by Paul VI is the ordinary expression of the lex orandi of the Catholic Church, of the Latin rite, quote unquote. And then this too, further on he says, quote, in the letter accompanying the motu proprio Traditionis Custodes, responding to your requests, I take the firm decision to abrogate all the norms, instructions, permissions, and customs that precede the present motu proprio, and declare that the liturgical books promulgated by the saintly pontiffs Paul VI and John Paul II, in conformity with the decrees of Vatican Council II, constitute the unique expression of the lex orandi of the Roman rite. Quote. The reason why I cite that is because I've heard traditionalists say that Pope Francis is wrong here, and not only wrong, but that the real lex orandi of the Catholic Church of Latin Rite is the Tridentine Rite and the Latin Mass. So how would you respond to that, and also other comments you have on that?
Yeah, there's so much to say here. I do think it's incumbent on Pope Francis to clarify what he means here, because I do think that there's multiple ways of interpreting it.
That's fair. Yeah.
But the way I understand it is what he's saying is that if you are going to be part of the Roman Rite, the way that you are going to pray is going to be in accord with the Missal of Paul VI, unless you have special permission to celebrate a previous form. Is that a reversal, however, of Benedict XVI, who took a little bit of, it seems, different approach, where he speaks of one being ordinary and one extraordinary, and didn't have as many permission requirements there. I think there's a little bit of a reversal going on here. And I think that that's what he means. Now, if he means something else, please clarify, because it's a little unclear what is meant. That's the only way that I know how to interpret what he said. And I will concede, I think there is a reversal, a partial reversal of Summorum Pontificum here. Does he have the authority to do that? Of course he does. Of course he has the authority. He could entirely reverse not only Summorum Pontificum, but anything else prior to that that is also disciplinary. Yes, he could do that. And this is definitely disciplinary. So I would say that he has the authority. Should he, however, do it is another discussion. But that's how I understand it. I don't know if that answers your question adequately though.
I see what you're saying, because like I was about to say, because like my understanding is that it is a reversal too, because at least that's the best I can get.
Partial reversal. It's not a full reversal. I think a full reversal would be that no priest in the Roman Rite could ever celebrate the Missal of John the 23rd. That would be a full reversal.
Oh, right.
But that's not the case. That's not the case, because Pope Francis still grants in specific cases priests could celebrate the Missal of 62.
Right.
So I'd just say it's a partial reversal insofar as there's a few additional restrictions. And the question then is, well, is it within the scope of papal authority to put these restrictions there? Yeah. John Paul II did.
Right. Yeah.
John Paul II put restrictions there. And again, from what we've seen from Trent, Vatican I, and Mediator Dei, I think he has that authority to put those kind of restrictions on which form is going to be celebrated and when and by whom. Doesn't mean that he exercises the best judgment whenever he does so, though. I mean, as Donum Veritatis notes, chapter 24, paragraph 3 notes that there are specific cases and acts of the magisterium that could be imprudent. Is this such a case? Is this such a case? I don't know. I guess I'll let history judge that. Initially, I thought it was imprudent, but I'm gravitating a little less away from that the more I see radical traditional reactions to it. So maybe it was actually necessary.
Yeah, because I was about to say, because like just briefly, my thoughts on it were how I continue to be sort of shocked, and back in July when it first came out, how different traditionalist news outlets had in like all capital letters, Pope abolishes Latin Mass. And I'm like, do you not know? Yeah, I know. I'm like, do you not know what a restriction is?
Right. Well, I mean, but look how misleading that is. I mean, that is incredibly misleading. I would also say that is sinful. Yeah. That's bearing false witness. And they're doing it against the Holy Father. And I'm not saying that we should treat the Holy Father based on whatever he deserves or his own personal merits. I'm saying we should treat the Holy Father based on the office that he fills. And that is a sin against his office.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely, I guess, because I agree with the reasons that Pope Francis gave in his motu proprio for doing what he was doing. My only concern or follow up, if I could ever talk to the Holy Father, would be there's a short paragraph, as you know, where he mentions that he too is saddened by the abuses that have happened in the ordinary form, and that he agrees with Benedict about these different innovations and creativity and liberty that has been taken and given. And in my own, just like for fun and I guess nerdiness, I've watched a few of like Pope Francis's papal masses, specifically the feast of Saint Peter and Paul. I've seen several of those on like Vatican News English on YouTube, and other masses too. And so I can tell from my own analysis of like Pope Francis and just the judgment of charity, he celebrates the ordinary form reverently. I don't see any type of, irreverence there. But what my concern would be, if I had like a minute or so to talk to the Pope, would be, could this be like a 200-page document with like a synod on the liturgy with it? Because I feel like we need more than just this paragraph to talk about the abuses that have happened since the 1970s. Because I know people that have left the church because of those abuses.
For me, I don't care anymore about a pope talking about the abuses. I want to see actual actions. He could write a 1,000-page document that means nothing. Put some teeth behind it, start excommunicating some people, start disciplining some people who are not carrying these things out. Then we'll talk. I mean, until then, talk is cheap. He can say that he decries liturgical abuse all day long, whatever. You can say that. That's not changing anything. It's time to actually put teeth behind it and start enforcing discipline. Now we're talking. Once we have that going, now we're talking. Until then, to me, it's just rhetoric.
Yeah, that's definitely fair, because like actions speak louder than words, as they say.
What good is it to just say that I decry, and I'm asking all these bishops to stop allowing it? They haven't done it already. Why is you simply asking that going to do anything? I mean, if my kids aren't listening to me and I just keep saying, please listen to me, and they're still not listening, just please listen to me, that's not going to do anything. I need to actually start disciplining them. So
yeah, I agree. And I won't name names because I don't want to get in trouble, but there's people on the left and the right that need to be
on both sides. But
I'll just say that.
I think there's more people on the left, and so
I agree.
Is,
why
even issue Traditionis Custodes unless it's in conjunction with a much larger document disciplining liberals in the church? Why just so one-sided? Well, because I think that he has more sympathy with the left and the right, in my opinion. At least that's what he shows us in his actions. But that's another matter. The question still is, does he have the authority to do this? Yeah, he has the authority. Right. If my dad disciplines my sister but doesn't discipline me, does he have the authority to discipline my sister? Yeah, he has the authority to discipline my sister, but he should also discipline me, right? Well, because he's not disciplining me, does that mean he doesn't have an authority to discipline my sister? No, that doesn't logically follow. He should discipline both, right? So,
yeah, and if you don't mind me saying, Michael, before we head out here, one of the things that's kind of frustrating for me as an outsider reading your articles and watching your shows, going over different arguments against the radical traditionalists and the radical traditionalists against you, is, to me, all what you're saying is, it's very nuanced and it's good stuff, but it's also kind of just like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's just bare minimum too, like in terms of requirement for the faith. Like for traditionalists, it seems like this, who want to paint you this makes me laugh. They want to, because I'm good friends with some liberals. They want to paint you as a liberal or something like that. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like,
I think because they're not going to or can't, one of the two, engage what I'm saying, they have to somehow slander me, which they have done a great deal of. So some of the people in that crowd have gone really low and done some very simple things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that that's kind of the fruit of their position anyway. So I guess I should expect it.
Sadly, yeah. But keep raising the banner of the globe and the ladder and being nuanced. And
I'll
so,
try. I'll do my best.
well, Michael, I'd love, if you're willing to, sometime in the future, I'd love to have you on for either
Yeah, man.
a part two, or to have
Yeah,
you on to talk
love to.
about the magisterium, or
That's my
um,
favorite topic. So
yeah.
anytime you want to talk about the magisterium, but yeah, I'm more than happy to talk your ear off on that one.
Definitely. And also, one a topic of mine that I really like that you've addressed in the past too on Swan Sona's channel is of Pope Saint Agatho, in his
Oh yeah,
letters. And so
yeah,
that's a fascinating case study in Orthodox and Catholic
yeah. I
relationships.
was talking to an Orthodox priest about that last night. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah. So
Mm,
yeah, I'd love to talk about some of that stuff with you. But
yeah,
well, everyone, this has been episode 10 on papal authority and the Roman liturgy with my guest, Michael Lofton, soon to be Dr. Lofton. You're still working on your dissertation. Do you know?
still work on it. No, not really sure. It's kind of hard to estimate it. Maybe a
Gotcha.
year and a half, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I'll provide links in the description below for all of your stuff, Michael. And it's been a joy and privilege having you on. And everyone out there, I'm going to mimic Michael and say like, comment, and subscribe, share on your
Right.
social media.
Yeah.
So until next time, everyone, have a great night.